A millionaire walks into a struggling garage with an $18 million Ferrari that no expert can fix. He looks at the old black mechanic and makes a cruel bet designed to humiliate him in front of the world. The cameras start rolling. The mockery begins. Everyone expects failure. But this arrogant rich man has no idea who he's really dealing with, and he's about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of Morrison's classic auto shop in a forgotten corner of Detroit. Marcus Hayes wiped the sweat from his forehead with an oil-stained rag, leaving a dark smear across his weathered brown skin. 67 years old, his hands told stories that his quiet voice never would. Calluses from decades of honest work, scars from engine burns, and tremors that came not from age, but from a past he'd spent a lifetime trying to forget. The sound of expensive tires on gravel made him look up. A pearl-white Bentley, gleaming like a diamond in the dusty lot, rolled to a stop. Marcus straightened slowly, his back protesting the movement. Rich customers were rare these days. Most people took their cars to the sleek dealerships downtown, the ones with air conditioning and complimentary espresso. The driver's door opened and out stepped Jonathan Whitmore III, a name that appeared regularly in the business sections of newspapers, usually accompanied by words like real estate mogul, philanthropist, and one of Detroit's wealthiest citizens. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his eyes held that peculiar mixture of confidence and contempt that came from never having heard the word no mean anything permanent. Behind him from the passenger side emerged a younger man, perhaps 35, with the same sharp features and entitled posture. This was Jason Whitmore, the son, who'd inherited not just his father's money but his casual cruelty. "This is the place?" Jason asked, looking around with visible disgust. "Dad, this is a dump. Let's go to the dealership." "The dealership can't fix it," Jonathan replied, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I was told the old man here knows vintage Ferraris." He emphasized old man with a dismissiveness that made it clear he didn't consider Marcus's expertise worth respecting, only using. Marcus approached slowly, his limp more pronounced than usual, an old injury from another lifetime. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Marcus Hayes. How can I help you?" Jonathan didn't extend his hand. Instead, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through it as he spoke, not bothering to make eye contact. "I have a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. Won't start. Every mechanic in the city says it's hopeless, that parts don't exist anymore, that it's too far gone. Someone mentioned you specialize in lost causes." The words hung in the air like an insult wrapped in a compliment. "I'd need to see it to assess," Marcus began. "It's being delivered," Jonathan interrupted, still looking at his phone. "Should be here in 20 minutes. I'm told you're good with your hands." He finally looked up, his eyes traveling over Marcus's stained coveralls with unconcealed disdain. Despite everything, Marcus understood perfectly what everything meant. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Jason laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Dad, why are we even bothering? Look at this place. Look at—" He gestured vaguely at Marcus, not even bothering to finish the sentence. "Because," Jonathan said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "this vehicle is worth $18 million, and if this man can make it run, I'll have proven every expert wrong. It'll be quite the story at the club." Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. He'd learned long ago that anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something else. A weary recognition of a pattern he'd seen too many times. "What's your rate?" Jonathan asked, finally addressing Marcus directly. "Depends on the work needed. For a full restoration on a 62 GTO, we're talking months of—" "I don't have months," Jonathan cut him off. "I have a collector's auction in 6 weeks. The Ferrari is the centerpiece. It needs to run perfectly, or I lose the sale and considerable prestige. Name a price for a rush job." Marcus calculated quickly. A job like this, done right, would require rare parts, hundreds of hours, expertise that few people possessed anymore. $60,000, maybe more, depending on what I find. Jason burst out laughing. 60,000? Dad, this is ridiculous. He's obviously trying to scam you. Jonathan held up a hand, silencing his son. A thin smile crossed his face, the smile of a cat playing with a mouse. I'll tell you what, Marcus. The use of his first name without the courtesy of Mr. Hayes was deliberate. I'm a betting man. You fix my Ferrari, make it purr like it did in 1962, and I'll pay you $100,000. Marcus's breath caught. 100,000 would save his shop, would pay off the medical bills from Sarah's treatments before she died 2 years ago, would maybe, finally, give him a chance to breathe. But, Jonathan continued, his smile widening, when you fail, and you will fail, because this car has beaten a dozen experts with fancy degrees and state-of-the-art equipment, you work for free. Every hour, every part, every drop of sweat. Free. Dad, that's genius, Jason said, grinning. And one more thing, Jonathan added, pulling out his phone to record. When you fail, I want you to admit, on camera, that you were wrong to take this job, that you were in over your head, that some things require a certain pedigree you simply don't possess. The words were surgical, precise, designed to cut without leaving visible scars. Marcus stood very still. In his mind, he saw Sarah in that hospital bed, holding his hand, telling him to never let anyone make him small. He saw his father, who'd taught him everything about engines before dying too young. He saw decades of being told he wasn't good enough, smart enough, worthy enough, all while doing work that most people couldn't dream of doing. And if I fix it? Marcus asked quietly. Then I'll give you the car, Jonathan said, laughing as if he'd just told the funniest joke in the world. If you can make it work, the Ferrari is yours. $18 million, just sitting in your pathetic little garage. Imagine that. Jason was nearly doubling over with laughter. Oh my God, Dad, that's perfect. Can you imagine? Him trying to explain to the insurance company how he owns a GTO? He pulled out his own phone, recording Marcus. This is going to be viral gold. The rumble of a truck interrupted them. A massive car carrier pulled into the lot, and on it, covered by a fitted tarp, was an unmistakable silhouette. The Ferrari. 2 workers carefully unloaded it, wheeling it into Marcus's garage. When they pulled off the tarp, even in its wounded state, the car was breathtaking. Rosso Corsa red, curves that seemed to defy physics, a piece of automotive history that represented the pinnacle of Italian engineering. It was also a disaster. The engine bay looked like a mechanical graveyard. Rust, disconnected parts, a wiring harness that appeared to have been attacked by rodents. This wasn't just a repair job. This was a resurrection. Jonathan walked around the car, running his finger along the dusty hood. 6 weeks, Marcus. The clock starts now. He turned to face him, and for a moment his mask slipped. Behind the practiced superiority was something uglier, a genuine belief that Marcus was fundamentally lesser. I'll enjoy watching you fail. There's something satisfying about watching someone realize they never belonged in the game to begin with. We'll be back in a week to check your progress, Jason added. This is going to be so entertaining. They left without another word, the Bentley's engine purring with the confidence of something that always worked, had always worked, and would always work, unlike the people who could never afford to own it. Marcus stood alone in his garage, staring at the broken Ferrari. Around him, the shop was silent except for the ticking of cooling metal and the distant sound of traffic. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something else. A memory, pushing its way to the surface after decades of being buried. He walked slowly to the small office at the back of the garage. On the wall, hidden behind a filing cabinet, was a frame he hadn't looked at in years. He moved the cabinet aside, revealing a photograph so faded it seemed more ghost than memory. 2 men stood beside a Ferrari. This same model, perhaps even this same car. One was a young Marcus, barely 20, his face unlined and full of hope. The other was an older white man with kind eyes and grease under his fingernails. Enzo Castellano, the master. Marcus's vision blurred, his hands trembled as he touched the glass of the frame. "I remember, old friend," he whispered to the photograph. "I remember everything." Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the same red as the Ferrari that sat waiting, like a test from the universe, like a ghost from a past that had never really let him go. Marcus Hayes had 6 weeks to do the impossible. But what Jonathan Whitmore didn't know, what no one except a few ghosts and faded photographs knew, was that once upon a time, in another life, Marcus hadn't just fixed Ferraris. He had built them. The first night Marcus didn't sleep. He couldn't. The Ferrari sat in his garage like a wounded animal, and every time he closed his eyes he saw other Ferraris, younger versions, pristine and powerful, rolling off assembly lines in a factory half a world away. Italy, 1961. He'd been 19 years old. Most people didn't know the story. How could they? It had been erased, written out of history by people who decided that some narratives were inconvenient. But Marcus remembered. He remembered everything. At dawn, he made coffee in the small pot that Sarah had used every morning, the one he couldn't bring himself to replace. The cup warmed his hands as he stood in the garage doorway, watching the sun paint the Ferrari in shades of gold. "Okay, old girl," he said softly. "Let's see what they did to you." He spent the first 3 days simply documenting every bolt, every wire, every component. He took hundreds of photographs, made detailed notes in a worn leather journal. To anyone watching, it might have looked like procrastination. But Marcus knew that rushing into a restoration was how you destroyed history. On the 4th day, Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant next door brought him lunch. She'd been doing it since Sarah died, never making a fuss about it, just leaving containers of food on his workbench. "You eating?" she asked in her direct way, eyeing him critically. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, managing a small smile. She looked at the Ferrari, then at him. "Expensive car for expensive people. They treat you okay?" Marcus didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Mrs. Chen clicked her tongue. "My grandfather, he built the railroad. They paid him nothing, treated him like dirt, then wrote him out of the history books. But the railroad still stands." She patted Marcus's shoulder. "Some men leave their mark even when people try to erase them. You remember that." After she left, Marcus returned to the engine. His hands, those trembling hands that Jonathan had looked at with such disdain, moved with absolute certainty. He knew this engine, not just this model, this specific configuration, this exact philosophy of engineering, because he'd helped design it. The memories came in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle he'd deliberately scattered. The factory floor at Maranello, 1961, the roar of engines being tested, the smell of racing fuel and Italian espresso, and Enzo Castellano, the chief engineer, standing over a young Marcus's shoulder as he calibrated a carburetor. "You have a gift, Marcus," Enzo had said in his thick Italian accent. "Your hands, they speak to the machines, they listen." "Why did you hire me?" Marcus had asked. It was the question that haunted him then, as a Black American in an Italian factory, surrounded by engineers who looked nothing like him. Enzo had smiled. "Because talent is not about where you come from or what you look like. It is about what you can create. And you, my young friend, you are an artist." But the dream had ended abruptly. A year later, corporate politics, racism that transcended borders, and people who couldn't accept that a Black teenager had contributed to their precious vehicles had sent him back to America with nothing but experience and a letter of recommendation that no one would honor. He'd spent the next 45 years in small garages, fixing ordinary cars, his genius relegated to oil changes and brake repairs. Sarah had known. She'd always known he was meant for more. But bills had to be paid, and life had a way of crushing dreams under the weight of survival. Now, decades later, here was his chance at redemption, or his final humiliation. By the end of the first week, when Jonathan and Jason returned, Marcus had the engine completely disassembled. Every part was laid out on white cloth, organized with surgical precision. "Well, well," Jonathan said, walking around the workspace with his hands in his pockets. "Looks like a very expensive mess. Made any progress, Marcus? Or are you starting to realize you're in over your head?" Jason recorded everything on his phone. "Dad, look at this. He's taken it completely apart. There's no way he's putting this back together." Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He simply pointed to a corroded fuel injector. "This component is from the wrong year. Someone tried to retrofit it. That's why it never ran properly." "Excuses already?" Jonathan laughed. "I expected better. At least make it entertaining." "The carburetor jets are mismatched," Marcus continued calmly, "and someone replaced the original Magneti Marelli distributor with an aftermarket one that's incompatible with the timing system. The wiring harness has been modified incorrectly, probably in the 1980s, and half the grounds are corroded. Whoever worked on this before didn't understand the philosophy of the original design." Jonathan's smile faltered slightly. "Philosophy? Ferrari built these engines to operate as a unified system. Every component affects every other component. You can't just replace parts. You have to understand the relationship between them." Marcus picked up a small brass fitting, turning it in his fingers. "This, for example, looks identical to a standard fitting, but it's machined to a tolerance of 1/1000th of an inch specifically for fuel pressure regulation. Using a generic replacement would cause vapor lock." There was a moment of silence. Jason stopped recording. "You're just reading from a manual," Jonathan said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "There is no manual for this level of detail," Marcus replied quietly. "This knowledge comes from understanding how these engines think, how they breathe. It's not something you learn from books. Where did an old mechanic like you learn about $1,000,000 Ferraris?" Jason asked, his tone challenging. Marcus met his eyes. "I worked with the people who built them." "Right," Jonathan scoffed, his confidence returning. "And I worked with the Queen of England." "Marcus, you're a dreamer. That's your problem. You people always are." The casual racism hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt something tight in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "The parts I need will take 2 weeks to arrive. Some will have to be custom fabricated because they don't exist anymore." "Custom fabricated? With what money?" Jonathan asked. "Mine," Marcus said simply. Jonathan laughed, a genuine, delighted laugh. "You're going to spend your own money fixing my car? On the chance you might win a bet you can't possibly win? Marcus, that's not courage. That's stupidity." "It's faith," Marcus corrected gently. "Faith?" Jason mocked. "Faith in what? God? Magic?" "In the work," Marcus said. "In doing the right thing, the right way, regardless of who's watching or what they think." Jonathan shook his head, amused. "You're a fossil, Marcus. A relic from a time that's gone. In the real world, faith doesn't fix engines. Money does, power does, and you have neither." After they left, Marcus stood alone in the garage. His hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from memory. It was from anger, a righteous anger he'd suppressed for so long it felt foreign in his chest. He pulled out his phone, an old model that barely worked, and made a call to a number he hadn't dialed in 15 years. "Hello?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Marcus Hayes. I'm trying to reach Antonio Castellano." There was a pause. "Mr. Hayes? Marcus Hayes from Detroit?" "Yes." "Please hold." The wait felt eternal. Then, a voice, older, weathered, but unmistakable. "Marcus? My God, Marcus, is it really you?" "Hello, Antonio," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "Antonio Castellano, son of Enzo, now the director of the Ferrari Classiche department in Italy. The last time they'd spoken had been at Enzo's funeral, a lifetime ago." "I heard you disappeared," Antonio said. "After my father passed, I tried to find you. No one knew where you went." "I went home," Marcus said simply. "Back to America. Back to being invisible." You were never invisible to us, Antonio said firmly. My father spoke of you until his last day. He said you had the touch, that you understood the soul of the machines. Marcus's throat tightened. Antonio, I need your help. I have a 1962 250 GTO, chassis number. He rattled off the identification. And it's in bad shape. I need original specifications, parts diagrams, anything you have in the archives. There was a sharp intake of breath. That chassis number. Marcus, do you know whose car that was originally? No. It was my father's personal project, one of the last GTOs built. He oversaw every detail personally. Antonio paused, emotion creeping into his voice. He always said it was the car you both worked on together, your first complete engine build. Marcus's knees went weak. He sat down heavily on a stool. I didn't know. I thought all those records were lost. Nothing is lost, Antonio said. Everything is here in the archives. Every blueprint, every note my father made. And Marcus, he mentioned you by name in the documentation. Your contributions are recorded. It's all here. Tears Marcus didn't know he could still produce rolled down his weathered cheeks. They wrote me out of history, Antonio. When I came back to America, no one believed I'd ever worked at Ferrari. No one believed I'd touched these engines. Then we rewrite history, Antonio said firmly. Tell me what you need. Over the next hour, they spoke the language of engineering, compression ratios, valve timing, fuel mixtures. Antonio promised to send everything overnight. Original blueprints, photographs from the factory floor, parts specifications. And something else. Something Marcus didn't ask for, but Antonio insisted on sending. There are photographs, Antonio said quietly, of you and my father working on that very car, building it. Your hands on the engine block, calibrating the timing. My father kept them all. He was proud of you, Marcus. So proud. After the call ended, Marcus sat in the silence of his garage, the disassembled Ferrari surrounding him like pieces of his own broken past. On his workbench, his phone buzzed. An email from Antonio. He opened it with trembling hands. The first photograph appeared on the screen. A young Marcus, barely 20, his face intense with concentration, his hands inside an engine bay. Beside him, Enzo Castellano, watching with the expression of a teacher seeing his student surpass expectations. The caption, in Enzo's handwriting, was in Italian. Marcus translated it slowly. Marcus Hayes, Detroit, Michigan. The Future of Ferrari Engineering. October 1961. More photographs loaded. Dozens of them. Marcus in the factory. Marcus calibrating instruments. Marcus testing engines. In every photo he was treated not as a curiosity or a token, but as what he was, a brilliant engineer doing work that few could match. And in the last photograph, the one that broke him completely, was Marcus and Enzo standing beside a completed Ferrari 250 GTO. This Ferrari, his Ferrari, with their arms around each other's shoulders. Both were smiling. Both were covered in grease. Both were equals. On the back of the photo, a note in Enzo's handwriting. To Marcus, you gave life to this machine. Never forget that talent has no color, no border, no limit but the sky. With pride and respect, Enzo Castellano, 1962. Marcus wept. Not from sadness, but from the sudden, overwhelming relief of being remembered, of having proof that he had existed, had mattered, had been seen. Mrs. Chen found him an hour later, still holding the phone, staring at the photographs. She didn't ask questions. She just put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. Now, she said firmly, you show them who you really are. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. He stood up, his back straightening despite the pain, his hands steadying with renewed purpose. Jonathan Whitmore thought he was betting against a broken-down old mechanic in a failing garage. He thought he was humiliating someone powerless, someone beneath him. He had no idea he was betting against a ghost, a man who'd been written out of history but had never stopped being exactly what he was meant to be, a master. The real work was about to begin. The packages from Italy arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a confused courier who'd never handled anything marked fragile historical documents, Ferrari Classiche archives. Marcus signed for them with shaking hands. Inside the first crate were parts, original components, some nearly 60 years old, preserved in climate-controlled storage. Each piece was wrapped in protective cloth and accompanied by documentation in Italian and English. But it was the second package that made him sit down hard on his work stool. Photographs, dozens of them professionally archived. But more than that, blueprints in his own handwriting, engineering notes with his signatures, test results with his calculations, an entire folder dedicated to M. Hayes, engine calibration specialist. Antonio had included a letter. Marcus, my friend. My father kept everything. He knew that someday, the truth would matter. He knew that history has a way of correcting itself even if it takes decades. These documents are copies. The originals remain in our archives, where they have always been. Your name has never been erased from our records. It was the world that refused to look. Now make them see. With respect and admiration, Antonio Castellano. That afternoon, Marcus began the real work. His hands moved with a confidence that seemed to flow from somewhere beyond himself. Muscle memory from a lifetime ago, when he'd been young and the world had seemed, for one brief moment, like it might actually judge him by his talent rather than his skin. He started with the engine block. Decades of poor maintenance had caused internal corrosion, but the core structure, the parts he'd helped machine and fit 60 years ago, remained sound. He could see Enzo's philosophy in every curve of metal, every calculated angle. "We don't just build engines," Enzo had told him once. "We build hearts. The car must have soul, Marcus. Without soul, it's just metal and fuel." Marcus worked 18-hour days. Mrs. Chen continued bringing food, now joined by her son David, who owned the restaurant. Word had spread in the neighborhood. The old man at the garage was restoring something special. On the 10th day, a young woman appeared in the doorway. She was perhaps 30, black, wearing a professional suit that contrasted sharply with the oil-stained environment. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked tentatively. Marcus looked up from where he was carefully cleaning a fuel injector. "Can I help you?" "My name is Keisha Williams. I'm a journalist with the Detroit Free Press." She held up a press badge. "I heard you're working on a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO. Marcus's expression closed. No comment. "Mr. Hayes, please, this isn't about the car. Well, not just about the car." She pulled out a tablet, swiping to show him an article. "I've been researching the history of black engineers in the automotive industry. It's a project I've been working on for 2 years. And 3 weeks ago I received an anonymous email with photographs. Photographs of you at the Ferrari factory in Italy, 1961. Marcus froze. "From who?" "Antonio Castellano. He said it was time your story was told properly." Marcus set down his tools slowly. "Miss Williams, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not looking for publicity. I'm just trying to do a job." "A job for Jonathan Whitmore," she said quietly. "I know about the bet, Mr. Hayes. His son Jason posted videos of the whole thing on social media. They've been mocking you for 2 weeks. Old mechanic thinks he can fix $1 million Ferrari. The comments." She trailed off, her expression pained. "They're ugly." Marcus felt a weight settle in his chest. He'd avoided social media, avoided knowing what people were saying. But of course they were saying terrible things, that's what people did. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Because the story they're telling is a lie," Keisha said firmly. "And I have proof. Antonio Castellano sent me everything. The archives, the photographs, your engineering notes. Mr. Hayes, you didn't just work at Ferrari, you were part of the team that designed the GTO's engine. You were a pioneer, and history erased you." "History didn't erase me," Marcus corrected gently. "People did. People who decided my contribution was inconvenient to their narrative." "Then let me write the real narrative," Keisha pressed. "Let me tell the truth." Marcus looked at the Ferrari, at the engine that was slowly coming back to life under his hands. "Not yet," he said finally. Let me finish the work first. Then, if you still want the story, we'll talk. Keisha nodded, understanding in her eyes. I'll wait. But Mr. Hayes, when the truth comes out, it's going to change everything. After she left, Marcus returned to work, but her words echoed in his mind. Change everything. He wasn't sure he wanted everything to change. He just wanted to finish what he'd started 60 years ago. The second week brought unexpected visitors. An old man shuffled into the garage, leaning heavily on a cane. He wore a faded jacket with an embroidered patch. UAW Local 600, Ford Rouge Plant. You Marcus Hayes? The man asked. Yes, sir. Name's Robert Johnson, retired tool and die maker. Worked at Ford for 43 years. He looked at the Ferrari with appreciation. Heard you were one of us. Heard you worked on the line in Italy before they sent you home. News travels fast, Marcus observed. Only the important news, Robert said. He pulled a worn envelope from his pocket. This is from the brothers at Local 600, retired chapter. We collected it. Nobody gave more than they could afford, but everybody gave something. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was nearly $3,000 in small bills. We can't let you fight alone, Robert said simply. A black man doing impossible work while rich folks try to humiliate him? That's our story too. That's everybody's story who ever worked with their hands and got told they weren't good enough. Marcus's eyes burned. I can't accept this. You can and you will, Robert said firmly, because this isn't charity. This is solidarity. You finish that car, you're not just proving yourself. You're proving all of us. Over the following days, more people came. Mrs. Chen's restaurant workers pooling tips. The owner of the corner store bringing supplies. A group of high school students from the neighborhood asking if they could watch and learn. Marcus's failing garage became something else. A gathering place, a symbol of something larger than one old man and one broken car. And the work progressed. The engine, piece by piece, component by component, returned to life. Marcus fabricated parts that no longer existed, using techniques he'd learned in another lifetime. His hands, those trembling hands that Jonathan had mocked, moved with absolute precision. On the 15th day, Jonathan and Jason returned earlier than expected. We were in the neighborhood, Jonathan said, though his tone suggested he'd come specifically to witness failure. Thought we'd check on our investment. The garage was different now, cleaner, more organized. The Ferrari's engine was partially reassembled and tools were arranged with professional precision. Jason noticed the photographs pinned to the wall, the ones from Italy. What's this, your fantasy wall? Pictures of cars you wish you could have worked on? Those are pictures of cars I did work on, Marcus said quietly, not looking up from his work. Jonathan stepped closer, examining the photos. His expression changed as he recognized the young man in the images. That's you? Ferrari factory, Maranello, Italy, 1961 to 1962. That's impossible, Jason scoffed. There weren't any black engineers at Ferrari in the 60s. There was one, Marcus corrected. Me. Jonathan laughed, but it sounded forced. Marcus, I don't know where you got these photos, but fabricating history won't fix that engine. Marcus finally looked up. He walked to his filing cabinet and pulled out the folder Antonio had sent, the original documentation complete with Ferrari letterhead, signatures, and official stamps. These are authenticated archives from Ferrari Classiche, Marcus said, handing them to Jonathan. Engineering specifications for chassis number 3729 GT. With my calculations, my signatures, and a letter of commendation from Enzo Castellano, the chief engineer. Jonathan's hands shook as he flipped through the documents. His face went pale. The car you brought me isn't just any Ferrari, Marcus continued, his voice steady but carrying an edge of something deeper. It's the first car I ever built from the ground up. The engine block still has my mark on it, a small MH near the serial number. I put it there when I was 19 years old. He walked to the engine and pointed. There, barely visible after decades of grime, were the initials. He'd cleaned that spot specifically for this moment. The garage fell silent except for the sound of Jason's breathing, which had become rapid and shallow. You knew, Jonathan said slowly, realization dawning. When I brought this car to you, you already knew. I knew the moment I saw it, Marcus confirmed. I'd recognize my own work anywhere. Then why? Jonathan's composure was cracking. Why accept the bet? Why let us humiliate you? Marcus smiled, not with triumph, but with something sadder and wiser. Because men like you need to humiliate people like me. It's how you confirm your own worth. I wanted to see if you were capable of learning something different. This is a setup, Jason said, his voice rising with panic. You planned this whole thing. No, Marcus corrected. You planned it. You brought me the car. You made the bet. You recorded the videos and mocked me online. I just showed up for work. Same as I've done every day for 67 years. Jonathan stared at the documents in his hands. Original Ferrari archives, authenticated photographs, undeniable proof that the old black mechanic he dismissed and mocked was actually a pioneer, a master craftsman who'd been written out of history. How much progress have you made? Jonathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus gestured to the engine. The block is restored. Cylinder heads are being refinished. I'm waiting on a custom fabricated fuel rail. Should arrive Friday. Electrical harness is rebuilt. Transmission has been serviced. If all goes well, I'll fire up the engine in 10 days. That's impossible, Jason stammered. Every expert said this would take months if it could be done at all. Every expert didn't build this engine the first time, Marcus said simply. A commotion outside drew their attention. More people had gathered. Neighbors, community members, word spreading that something important was happening in the old garage. Among them was Keisha Williams, camera in hand. And standing beside her, distinguished and out of place in the Warren neighborhood, was an older white man in an expensive suit. Father O'Malley, Mrs. Chen said, greeting him warmly. Thank you for coming. The priest smiled. When I heard what was happening here, I couldn't stay away. This is the kind of story that needs witnessing. Jonathan's face flushed red. This is a private matter. No, Father O'Malley said gently. This stopped being private when you made it about humiliation, when you tried to prove that this man was less than you. That kind of cruelty echoes beyond private walls. We should go, Jason urged his father, pulling at his sleeve. But Jonathan stood frozen, staring at Marcus. For the first time in his life, he was facing something his money couldn't buy his way out of, his power couldn't intimidate, and his privilege couldn't erase. The truth. 10 days, Jonathan said finally. We'll be here when you try to start it. As they left, Jonathan paused at the door. Those documents, are they real? Yes, Marcus said. And Antonio Castellano really sent them? Yes. Jonathan nodded slowly, something breaking behind his eyes. Then I've made a terrible mistake. Yes, Marcus agreed. You have. After they'd gone, the crowd outside erupted in applause, but Marcus didn't feel victorious. He felt tired and old and aware that the hardest part was still ahead, because fixing the engine was one thing. Making Jonathan Whitmore understand what he'd really done, the damage beyond metal and pride, that was something else entirely. That night, alone in his garage with Sarah's coffee mug in his hands, Marcus whispered to the ghost of his wife, I'm scared, Sarah. What if I fail? What if all this means nothing? The Ferrari sat silent in the darkness, waiting. And somewhere in Italy, Antonio Castellano was looking at the same photographs, remembering his father's words. History corrects itself, Antonio. It might take decades, but the truth always finds a way home. Marcus set down the mug and returned to work. The engine needed him. The truth needed him. And maybe, just maybe, Jonathan Whitmore needed him too, even if he didn't know it yet. The final 10 days became a blur of precision work and mounting pressure. Marcus's garage transformed into something resembling a pilgrimage site. People came not just to watch, but to bear witness, to see a man reclaim his stolen history, one bolt at a time. On day 16, the custom fuel rail arrived from a specialty fabricator in California. Marcus installed it with hands that no longer trembled. Around him, a small crowd watched in reverent silence. Mrs. Chen and her family, Robert Johnson and the union retirees, high school students taking notes, and Keisha Williams documenting everything. "Why does this matter so much to you?" one of the students asked. Her name was Jasmine, 16, sharp-eyed and curious. "It's just a car." Marcus paused, holding a Torx wrench. "It's never just a car," he said quietly. "This Ferrari represents a moment in my life when I was seen for who I really was. Not by everyone, but by the people who mattered. Enzo Castellano saw a 19-year-old black kid from Detroit and didn't see a color or a limitation. He saw hands that could create something beautiful." "But they sent you home," Jasmine pressed. "They erased you." "Enzo didn't," Marcus corrected. "The company did. The people who came after him did. But Enzo kept the records. He kept the photographs. He made sure that somewhere, somehow, the truth survived." He returned to his work. "That's why this matters. Because the truth always matters, even when it takes 60 years to be heard." Father O'Malley began stopping by daily, not to preach, but to listen. On day 18, he found Marcus working late, alone. "You're carrying something heavy," the priest observed, settling onto a stool. "Something beyond this engine." Marcus didn't look up. "Sarah died 2 years ago. Cancer. The bills took everything we had. This shop was supposed to be her legacy, our legacy. Instead, it's dying just like she did, a little more each day. And if you win this bet, the 100,000 would save it. Maybe even let me hire help, teach someone what I know before it's gone forever." Marcus's voice cracked. "But that's not why I'm doing this." "Then why?" Marcus finally looked at him, tears in his eyes. "Because I need to know if I was real. If that year in Italy meant anything. If I was ever more than just invisible." Father O'Malley placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "My son, you've never been invisible. You've been ignored. That's different. And now, the whole world is about to see what was always there." On day 20, Jonathan Whitmore returned alone. No Jason, no cameras, no swagger. He stood at the garage entrance, looking smaller somehow, diminished. "May I come in?" he asked, not demanded. Marcus nodded, continuing his work on the electrical system. Jonathan approached slowly, watching Marcus's hands move with practiced expertise. "I've spent the last week reading about you," he said finally. "Antonio Castellano sent me the full archives. Every document, every photograph, every letter his father wrote about you." Marcus said nothing. "Enzo called you the most naturally talented engineer I've ever trained," Jonathan continued, his voice thick. "He wrote that you had an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that couldn't be taught. It was simply part of who you were." He paused. "And I called you old man, like it was an insult. I treated you like you were nothing. You treated me like you've treated everyone who doesn't look like you, doesn't have what you have," Marcus said quietly. "I was just another one." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "You weren't, and that makes it worse." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to show Marcus. "Jason's videos have been seen by 500,000 people. The comments, they're vile, racist, cruel, dehumanizing, and I let him post them. I encouraged it because I thought it was funny." Marcus finally stopped working. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Keisha Williams contacted me. She's publishing her article tomorrow, the full story of who you really are, what you accomplished, how you were erased from history, and she's including the videos Jason posted." Jonathan's hands shook. "By tomorrow afternoon, everyone will know what I did, what we did, and they should know. We deserve whatever comes." "Is that what this is?" Marcus asked, his voice hard. "You're here to get ahead of the scandal? To control the narrative?" "No," Jonathan said, and there was something broken in his voice. "I'm here to apologize. Not because I'm afraid of consequences, but because I need you to hear it." He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for the humiliation, the cruelty, the casual racism. I'm sorry for treating you as less than human. and I'm sorry it took being exposed to make me see what I'd become. The silence stretched between them. Your apology doesn't undo the damage, Marcus said finally. I know. It doesn't erase the videos or the mockery or the pain you caused. I know. And it doesn't change who you are, someone who needed to be forced into decency. Jonathan flinched but nodded. You're right. About all of it. Marcus studied the man before him. 67 years had taught him to recognize real remorse from performative guilt. This, he realized with surprise, was real. Why did you really make that bet? Marcus asked. The truth. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. Because I wanted to prove that people like you, black people, poor people, people without pedigree or connections, are exactly where they deserve to be. That success requires something you don't have. He looked up, eyes wet. Because if you could succeed, then everything I've believed about my own success would be a lie. And now I know it was always a lie. Jonathan whispered. I didn't earn my success. I inherited it. And I've spent my whole life believing that made me superior, when really it just made me lucky and blind. Marcus picked up a photograph from his workbench, the one of him and Enzo beside the completed Ferrari. This man taught me that there are two types of people in the world, those who build things and those who take credit for them. Enzo was a builder. So was I. He looked at Jonathan. What are you? The question hung in the air like a challenge and a lifeline all at once. I don't know, Jonathan admitted, but I want to find out. Over the next 3 days, something unexpected happened. Jonathan returned every day, not to supervise or judge, but to learn. He sat quietly watching Marcus work, asking careful questions, listening to answers. Why do you tighten that bolt in that specific pattern? He asked on day 23. Because the engine block is under tremendous stress, Marcus explained. If you tighten randomly, you create uneven pressure that can cause cracks. You work from the center outward in a star pattern, gradually increasing torque. It's like conducting an orchestra. Every element has to come together in harmony. Jonathan took notes, actual notes, in a leather journal. On day 24, Jason appeared sullen and defensive. Dad, what are you doing here? The lawyer said, The lawyers can wait. Jonathan cut him off. I'm learning something. Learning what? How to fix cars. Jason's voice dripped with contempt. No, Jonathan said quietly. How to be humble. You should try it. Jason left, but his absence felt like its own kind of presence, a reminder of the old Jonathan, the one who'd walked into this garage 4 weeks ago, certain of his superiority. On day 25, with the engine fully assembled and every system checked and rechecked, Marcus stood before it with a mixture of pride and terror. Tomorrow was the day. Tomorrow he would attempt to bring this machine, this piece of his own history, back to life. That night, the garage filled with people. It wasn't planned, but word had spread. This was the eve of something important, and people wanted to be part of it. Father O'Malley led a simple prayer, not for success, but for truth. Lord, let this work honor the hands that made it and the spirit that endured. Let it remind us that talent has no color, that genius knows no boundary, and that justice, though delayed, will always find its way home. Mrs. Chen brought enough food to feed everyone. Egg rolls and dumplings, orange chicken and fried rice, served on paper plates while people sat on overturned crates and toolboxes. Robert Johnson stood, raising a cup of Mrs. Chen's green tea. To Marcus Hayes, he said, his voice carrying across the crowded garage, who showed us that the hardest work isn't fixing what's broken, it's refusing to be broken yourself. Everyone drank to that. Jasmine, the high school student, approached Marcus shyly. Mr. Hayes, I've been accepted to MIT's engineering program. I didn't think I could do it. Didn't think they wanted people like me. But watching you these past weeks... She trailed off, emotion choking her voice. You made me believe I could. Marcus pulled her into a gentle hug. You were always capable, Jasmine. You just needed to see someone who looked like you doing the impossible. Now you go and be that person for the next generation." Around midnight, when everyone had finally left, Marcus stood alone with the Ferrari. He placed his hand on the hood, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. "Tomorrow, old girl," he whispered. "Tomorrow we see if 60 years was too long to wait for justice." Jonathan had stayed behind, sitting quietly in a corner. "Marcus," he called softly, "whatever happens tomorrow, thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me," Jonathan said. "You could have. You had every right to. But you kept showing me who you were, kept demonstrating grace and dignity even when I didn't deserve it." He stood, walking to Marcus. "My father taught me that money was power. You're teaching me that character is strength. Those aren't the same thing." Marcus nodded slowly. "Your father taught you wrong. But that doesn't mean you can't learn something different." They stood together in the dim garage, two men from different worlds united by a machine that represented both the best and worst of human nature. The genius that creates and the prejudice that destroys. "Will it work?" Jonathan asked. "Honestly?" Marcus sighed. "I don't know. I've done everything right, followed every specification, used every bit of knowledge I have. But this engine is 60 years old. Parts that shouldn't wear out have worn out. Metal that should be perfect has been stressed. There are 1,000 things that could go wrong. But you believe it will work." "I have to," Marcus said simply. "Because if it doesn't, then Jonathan Whitmore was right. I was in over my head, reaching for something I had no right to touch. And I can't let that be the story. I won't." Jonathan placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture that 4 weeks ago would have been unthinkable. "The story is already written, Marcus. You've already won. Whether that engine starts or not, the world now knows who you are. They know what you did. You've reclaimed your history." "Maybe," Marcus allowed. "But I still need to hear it run. Just once. I need to know that what we built, what Enzo and I created together, wasn't lost, that it survived, that we survived." They parted with a handshake that felt like a treaty, fragile, but genuine. Alone again, Marcus made his final preparations. He checked fluid levels, verified electrical connections, examined every gasket and seal. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. But as he worked, he thought about all the times in his life when everything had been perfect and ready, and the world had still said no. The job applications rejected. The promotions denied. The doors closed not because he wasn't good enough, but because he was black. "Faith," he whispered to himself, echoing what he'd told Jonathan weeks ago. Faith in the work. Faith that doing the right thing the right way matters even when no one's watching. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photograph one more time. Young Marcus and Enzo, arms around each other, smiling beside a completed Ferrari. Brothers in every way that mattered. "I'm going to make you proud, old friend," Marcus said to the ghost in the photograph. "One way or another, I'm going to make you proud." Outside, Detroit slept. But in a small garage in a forgotten neighborhood, history was holding its breath, waiting for morning, waiting for the moment when an engine would either roar to life or remain forever silent, waiting to see if 60 years of patience, dignity, and unwavering faith would finally be rewarded. The dawn would bring an answer, and whatever that answer was, the world would be watching. The morning of day 26 dawned gray and cold, but by 9 a.m., the street outside Marcus's garage was packed. Word had spread through social media, through Keisha Williams's article that had gone viral overnight, through the simple human need to witness justice after decades of injustice. The article's headline read, "The Engineer They Erased, How Marcus Hayes Built Ferraris and History Forgot Him." Within 12 hours, it had been shared 3 million times. News vans lined the street. Reporters from major networks jostled for position. But they were outnumbered by regular people, mechanics in work uniforms, Elderly black men and women who remembered when genius wasn't enough if your skin was the wrong color. Young people who needed to see that truth could still matter. Inside the garage, Marcus moved with deliberate calm, though his hands shook so badly he had to pause and breathe deeply. He'd barely slept. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he'd seen Enzo's face, heard his voice. "You have the touch, Marcus. Trust yourself." Mrs. Chen arrived with breakfast no one would eat. Father O'Malley stood quietly in a corner, his lips moving in silent prayer. Robert Johnson and the Union men formed a protective barrier at the entrance, keeping the crowd at a respectful distance. At 9:30, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up, not the Bentley this time. Jonathan emerged, wearing jeans and a simple shirt, looking like he hadn't slept either. Jason was with him, but the younger man's usual arrogance had been replaced by something that looked like shame. The crowd parted silently as they approached. Someone booed. Jonathan flinched but didn't respond. "Marcus," he said quietly, when he reached the garage entrance. Marcus looked up from his final checks. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that whatever happened next would define them both. "Come in," Marcus said simply. As Jonathan and Jason entered, Keisha Williams approached with her camera. "Mr. Hayes, can I document this?" Marcus nodded. "The truth should have witnesses." Antonio Castellano appeared on a video call, connected to a tablet that Mrs. Chen's son held up. From Italy, the director of Ferrari Classiche had insisted on being present, even if only virtually. "Marcus, my friend," Antonio's voice carried across the garage. "My father is with you today. I feel it. He never stopped believing in you." Marcus's throat tightened. "Thank you, Antonio, for everything, for keeping the truth alive." "No," Antonio corrected gently. "Thank you for living it." At exactly 10 a.m., Marcus took his position in the driver's seat. The Ferrari's interior smelled of leather and history. His hands gripped the steering wheel, the same wheel he'd helped install 60 years ago. The crowd outside had grown to hundreds. Police had arrived to manage the traffic. Helicopters circled overhead. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about something larger, a reckoning with the past, a demand that excellence be recognized regardless of who performed it. Marcus inserted the key. The moment stretched, elastic and infinite. "Whatever happens," Jonathan said, his voice breaking the silence, "I need to say something." He stepped forward and Keisha's camera captured everything. 4 weeks ago, I came to this garage with cruelty in my heart. I humiliated a good man because I could, because I thought his poverty and his color made him less than me. I made a bet designed to destroy his dignity. His voice cracked. I didn't know I was standing before a master, a pioneer, a man who'd achieved things I could never dream of achieving. But even if I had known, even if Marcus had been exactly what I thought he was, just a struggling mechanic trying to survive, he still wouldn't have deserved what I did to him. Jason shifted uncomfortably, but Jonathan continued. My son posted videos mocking this man. 500,000 people laughed at those videos, and I laughed too. Tears ran freely down his face now. Marcus Hayes, I cannot undo what I did. I cannot erase those videos or take back those words. But I can stand here before all these witnesses and say, I was wrong. I was cruel. I was everything that's ugly about privilege and prejudice. And I am profoundly, deeply sorry. The garage was silent except for the sound of Jonathan's ragged breathing. Furthermore, he continued, pulling out a legal document, regardless of whether this engine starts, I am donating $1 million to establish the Marcus Hayes Scholarship Fund for Black engineering students, and I am transferring the title of this Ferrari to you, Marcus, not as a bet payment, but as a return of what was always yours. Marcus stared at him. Jonathan. No, Jonathan interrupted. Let me finish. I've spent my whole life taking credit for things I didn't build, opportunities I didn't earn, success I didn't deserve. You've spent your whole life being denied credit for things you created with your own 2 hands. This is the smallest possible beginning of balance. He handed the document to Marcus. This Ferrari is yours. Your name is on the engine block. Your genius made it possible. It should have your name on the title, too. Marcus took the document with shaking hands. Around him, people were crying. Mrs. Chen, Father O'Malley, even some of the reporters. Jason, Jonathan said, turning to his son, you have something to say. Jason stepped forward reluctantly. He looked at Marcus, then at the ground, then back up, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. Mr. Hayes, I don't have the words my father has. I'm not good at this. His voice was thick with emotion. But I took down the videos. All of them. And I posted a public apology. And I know that's not enough. That nothing is enough, but I want you to know that watching you these past weeks, seeing your dignity while we tried to destroy you, it changed me. Or started to, anyway. He pulled out his phone. I've been accepted to community college, engineering program, basic level. I'm going to learn what it means to actually build something instead of just inheriting it. Marcus looked at both men, the father and son who'd tried to humiliate him, who'd now been humbled themselves. He thought about Sarah's words. Some people need to learn the hard way, and some people never learn at all. The real question is whether you can tell the difference. I forgive you, Marcus said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying hate is heavier than carrying this engine ever was. I forgive you so I can be free. Jonathan broke down completely, sobbing like a child. Jason put his arms around his father, both of them crying. Father O'Malley approached Marcus. It's time, my son. Whatever God wills, the truth is already victorious. Marcus nodded. He turned the key. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence was absolute. Hundreds of people holding their breath as one. Then, a cough, a sputter. The engine turned over once, twice, catching and losing and catching again. Marcus adjusted the throttle with the precision of a surgeon, listening to the engine's voice, responding to its needs as if they were speaking a language only they understood. And then, like a prayer being answered, like justice finally arriving after a 60-year delay, the engine roared to life. The sound was magnificent, a deep, throaty growl that spoke of power and precision and perfection. The Ferrari trembled with barely contained energy, every cylinder firing in flawless synchronization. It was the sound of history correcting itself. The crowd outside erupted. People shouted, cried, embraced strangers. Inside the garage, Robert Johnson and his union brothers raised their fists in triumph. Mrs. Chen covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming. Keisha Williams captured it all, her own hands shaking with emotion. On the video call, Antonio Castellano was weeping openly. Papa, he whispered in Italian. Papa, can you hear it? Marcus did it. Your boy did it. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, one hand on the wheel, the other on the gear shift, feeling the engine's vibration through the entire car. It was like holding a living thing, a heart that he'd brought back from the edge of death. He revved the engine gently and it responded with that distinctive Ferrari howl, a sound that hadn't been heard from this particular car in decades. Every note was perfect, every response was immediate. It ran like it had 60 years ago, when he and Enzo had first brought it to life. Marcus shut off the engine. In the sudden silence, he could hear people crying, laughing, celebrating outside. He stepped out of the car slowly, his legs unsteady. Jonathan approached, arms open in a gesture of embrace, but stopped, uncertain whether he had the right. Marcus made the decision for him, pulling the older man into a hug. We're both free now, he whispered. You're free from your arrogance and I'm free from being invisible. They held each other while cameras flashed and the world watched two men, one black, one white, one poor, one rich, find humanity in each other. The celebration that followed lasted hours. Someone brought champagne. Mrs. Chen's restaurant donated food for the entire crowd. Musicians appeared with instruments, playing jazz and blues in the street. Jasmine, the high school student, approached Marcus as he was showing a group of children the engine. Mr. Hayes, she said shyly, would you teach me how to do what you do? Marcus smiled through his tears. Jasmine, I'll teach anyone who wants to learn. That's what Enzo taught me. Knowledge isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be shared. He looked around at the crowd. Black, white, Latino, Asian, young and old, rich and poor, all gathered together because a machine had roared to life and reminded them that excellence has no color, genius knows no boundary, and justice, though it may take 60 years, will always find its way home. That evening, as the crowd finally dispersed and quiet returned to the garage, Marcus sat alone with the Ferrari one last time. He ran his hand along the hood, feeling the warmth of the engine. "We did it, old friend," he whispered to the ghost of Enzo Castellano. "They tried to erase us, but we survived. We both survived." He pulled out the photograph, the one of him and Enzo standing beside this very car in 1962, and placed it on the dashboard. Two men, master and student, who'd believed in each other when the world said they shouldn't. Jonathan appeared in the doorway. "Marcus, can I come in?" Marcus nodded. Jonathan sat down on a work stool, looking older and somehow younger at the same time. "I've been thinking about what you said, about there being builders and people who take credit. I want to be a builder." "Then build," Marcus said simply. "I don't know how. I've never actually created anything in my life." Marcus smiled. "Neither had I, until someone gave me a chance. Until someone looked past what I looked like and saw what I could become." He gestured to the Ferrari. "This car exists because a man named Enzo Castellano believed in a scared black kid from Detroit. Now I'm a scared old black man from Detroit, and maybe it's my turn to believe in someone." "You'd teach me?" Jonathan asked, disbelief in his voice. "I'd teach anyone willing to learn," Marcus replied. "That's what masters do. They pass it on." Over the following weeks, the story continued to unfold. Keisha Williams's article won a Pulitzer Prize. Ferrari officially acknowledged Marcus's contributions, adding his name to their historical records and inviting him to Italy for a ceremony honoring his work. The Marcus Hayes Scholarship Fund grew beyond Jonathan's initial donation, receiving contributions from across the country. Within 6 months, 20 students were enrolled in engineering programs they couldn't have afforded otherwise. Marcus's garage was renovated and expanded, becoming the Marcus Hayes Center for Automotive Excellence, a place where young people could learn not just how to fix cars, but how to believe in themselves. And 3 times a week, Jonathan Whitmore could be found there, wearing coveralls and learning to use his hands for something other than signing checks. He wasn't good at it yet. His expensive education hadn't prepared him for the honest humility of manual labor. But he was trying, and that counted for something. Jason came too, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Under Marcus's patient teaching, he discovered he had a talent for electrical systems, a precision that surprised everyone, including himself. The Ferrari remained in Marcus's possession, but he rarely drove it. Instead, it sat in a place of honor at the center, a reminder of what was possible when excellence was finally recognized, when justice was finally served. On the 1-year anniversary of that morning when the engine roared back to life, a ceremony was held. The mayor gave Marcus a key to the city. Antonio Castellano flew in from Italy to present him with Ferrari's highest honor, the Enzo Castellano Medal of Engineering Excellence. But the moment Marcus treasured most came when Jasmine took the podium, now a freshman at MIT, and spoke to a crowd of hundreds. "A year ago, I didn't think people like me belonged in engineering. I thought genius looked a certain way, came from certain places, had a certain color. Then I met Mr. Hayes, and he showed me that excellence is about the work, not the pedigree, about persistence, not privilege, about dignity in the face of humiliation, and grace in the face of cruelty." She looked directly at Marcus. "You didn't just fix a Ferrari, Mr. Hayes. You fixed something broken in all of us. The lie that some people matter more than others, that some dreams are reserved for certain people. You showed us that truth always matters, even when it takes 60 years to be heard." The crowd rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. That night, Marcus stood in the empty center, alone with the Ferrari and his memories. He thought about Enzo, about Sarah, about all the years of being invisible, being dismissed, being told he wasn't good enough. And he thought about how all of that pain, All of that injustice had somehow led to this moment. Not just his own redemption, but a transformation in others, a ripple effect of change that would touch lives he'd never meet. Was it worth it? He asked the ghost of Sarah. He imagined her smile, heard her voice in his memory. You changed the world, Marcus. One engine, one person, one act of dignity at a time. That's all any of us can do. And yes, my love, it was worth it. Marcus placed his hand on the Ferrari one last time. His work here was done, but a new work was just beginning. Teaching, mentoring, ensuring that no other talented kid would spend 60 years being invisible. As he turned off the lights and locked the door, Marcus Hayes, master engineer, pioneer, and living testament to the power of persistence, walked into the cool evening air with his head high. Behind him, the Ferrari gleamed in the moonlight, a machine that had become a monument. Not to wealth or status, but to something infinitely more valuable. The truth that excellence cannot be erased, dignity cannot be destroyed, and justice, no matter how long delayed, will always find its way home. And in workshops and classrooms across the country, young people whose names he'd never know were learning that their dreams mattered, their talents were real, and their worth was inherent. Not because of where they came from or what they looked like, but because they were human beings with gifts to share and contributions to make. The Ferrari was just a car. But what it represented, the reclamation of stolen history, the recognition of denied genius, the transformation of hearts too proud to see, that would endure forever. And somewhere, in a place beyond time and memory, Enzo Castellano smiled, knowing that his student had become the master he'd always believed him to be. The engine had roared to life, and so had the truth. If this story of dignity, redemption, and the power of truth touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to remember that excellence has no color, that genius knows no boundaries, and that it's never too late for justice to prevail. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that remind us of what truly matters. Not wealth or status, but character, courage, and the quiet strength to remain dignified even when the world tries to break you. Leave a comment and tell us, have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever witnessed someone's talent being ignored because of who they were rather than what they could do? Your story matters. Your voice matters. Because just like Marcus Hayes proved that one man's dignity can change hearts and rewrite history, your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Hit that like button if you believe that truth always matters, even when it takes 60 years to be heard. And remember, the world needs more people who build, who create, who persist with grace even when faced with cruelty. Be that person. Be like Marcus.